I'd like to say thank you, Rick Prado, for joining the Sarah Carter Show, for joining my show. I got to tell you, I was bragging about you at the top of the show. I am Cuban on part of my mom's side and learned to love my country, the United States of America, because of her and because of her, how she stood up and my family stood up against communism. And after reading about you and after this, I'm so excited about your book. You just make me proud. You make me proud to be American, and you make me proud to be a Cuban American on my mom's side of the family. And my father was a war veteran. So thank you very much for your service, Rick. Thank you for everything you've done.
Well, thank you. And thank your family too, because they've taken a role. That is a very current occurring theme through the whole, the book is the communist angle. And of course, it's very apropos today because of what's going on in Ukraine. But, I was there during the revolution. I had guns fired right in front of my face during the scrimmage that they had when I was 7. I saw people hanging from trees after Castro took over with signs that said Contra Revolutionary. And from there, I came to the United States by a program called Peter Pan, which was trying to get the Cuban kids out of Cuba into the States, and I ended up in an orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado, turned 11 there. And that was an adventure in and of itself. But throughout the book, I have fought communism in 5 different incarnations, so I'm very proud of that.
Well, let me tell you, my cousins came on the Peter Pan as well. I was the firstborn here in the United States. And, I remember the stories of my aunt, and I'm sure your parents went through that, of having to send their children forward without any knowledge that they may never see them again, What was that like for your mom and dad?
Courage personified, and it's been my battery for electricity for a long time because I'm an only child. Imagine putting your only child on an airplane to a country you've never been to, and like you said, may well could be, never visit. So only for freedom, not for economic reasons, because we were solid middle class in Cuba, and we were below the poverty line for the first 5 years in the United States.
So many Cuban Americans and so many immigrants face that every single day. And you brought up something that I wanted to start off with, and I agree with you. Right now, we're seeing Vladimir Putin and his forces in Ukraine. We're seeing, of course, all the video of the families, of the children underground, people fighting on the streets for freedom. And I remember covering Maidan, and back in 2013 and 14, when the first uprising in Ukraine. And I remember the people saying, this isn't even about the change of government anymore. This is about freedom of being free of tyranny, of being able to stand up and be your own person and have your own liberty without having the government push you down or kill you or imprison you for your political or religious beliefs. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's what inspired you, right? To go into the agency and to fight for freedom, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it began with that early adventure, like I mentioned, but very quickly I developed a little bit of a guilt because my parents had sacrificed so much and I was benefiting so much from being in the United States that I realized, and there's that episode that you're talking about, the New York New York Post, I'm sorry. And that's the first time I found purpose. And for me, I've never worked a day in my life. I've never woke up one morning and gone, gee, I got to go to work. So for me, that was definitely the driving force, the communism stuff. I am unpleasantly surprised, however, how surprised people are that Putin is doing this. I mean, history repeats itself over and over and over again. He said it when he took over power that he was going to resuscitate the Soviet Union. How does that work? Take power, control the people, oppress the people, and expansionism. And he's not the first. It starts with Stalin and Khrushchev and all of those in between. So for me, for our leaders to go, oh my gosh, Putin is crazy. No, Putin is Putin. Putin is the quintessential Russian idol. He's the alter ego of every Russian male. I know there's a 1% that is trying to protests, and they're paying the price for it, which doesn't happen here.
Right.
I'm glad. But he is what he is. And it shouldn't surprise any of us that this is their intent. And even if we push them back on this, or Ukrainians push them back on this, they'll just sit on it. For them, it's called creeping normalcy, by the way. Mm-hmm. They will take that eastern side, and if they stop there, you know what, 6 months from now, you think we'd be talking about it? No. And now It's normal. That is part of Russia. Next time they see a sign of weakness, and next time they see an opportunity, they'll jump on it and get the other half.
Let me ask you this, because I agree with you. I think we saw and in fact, he led us on a trail. He let breadcrumbs everywhere. We saw it when he entered Georgia. We saw it with Chechnya. We've seen it with his assassination attempts and successful assassination of people that have opposed him. I mean, to the point where, where you're using radiation, right? You're killing someone in another land, like in Great Britain, and you're taking someone's life with something as extreme as like radioactive poisoning or something of this nature. I mean, it's not that he's crazy. This is how he operates. He's a former KGB, guy. He believed in Mother Russia. He believed in the power of the Russian people and communism. So I'm like you. I'm like, why is everyone surprised that this guy's making a move? Why? And do you think he's going to back down? Do you think he's going to back down? I mean, look, he's 73 or 74. He's not going to, I don't think he's going to back down.
He will act accordingly depending on what we're countering with. But military force alone is not going to do it, and we need to support. But even just before Putin, people forget, they did the same thing to Afghanistan just before the wall came down. They invaded Afghanistan. They fought in Afghanistan trying to control it for years, and that was part of their downfall. Yeah.
Right. I think I was really fascinated. And now that you bring up Afghanistan, I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan, and I covered Afghanistan during the war, many years going there as a journalist. And so I'm very connected to that region of the world. There were many times, and I was looking at the interview you did, which was a phenomenal interview, and everyone should look at it and see it and find it online, with 60 Minutes with David Martin, and I think it was just a phenomenal interview. But you talk a little bit about this. You talk about strategies that were things that should have taken place maybe and never did. One of them was Osama bin Laden, and that you believed that there was an opportunity for the CIA to actually capture him and question him, and it may have prevented September 11th. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's two vignettes in the book that talk about things that we should have done. Bin Laden is one, and the other one is at the end of the book, because it was the end of my career. I tried to do something for the last 3 years that told me that it was time to retire when that didn't work. But I will get to that one later. But the Osama bin Laden, I opened a bin Laden station in 1995, late 95. Mike Shorey was the chief. I was the deputy. We had a great cadre, a couple of other male officers, and about 6 or 7 analysts that were females. And I loved them because, boy, you talk about the mother instinct when it comes to profession. They're scary. They really know how to lock into things. So it was a fantastic little group. I didn't know anything about bin Laden at the time. But Billy Wall, who you saw a little bit of
right.
at the CBS program, he was our guy on the ground. Kofor Black was the chief of station there in Khartoum in 95-ish, in 96. And we had surveillance on bin Laden. We knew what he had for lunch. We knew what car he drove. We knew the routes we took. We knew how many bodyguards Billy is a master military guy. He evaluated their posture, their weapons, their demeanor, everything. We had it down to a gnat.
Wasn't he close enough to him that, he was so close to him at times that he could almost touch him. he was so close, right?
He was running one time, and bin Laden came out on his Mercedes, and Billy did one of these, salute him. So he could have poked him in the eye with a pencil. But we weren't allowed, and that's the point. We raised several times 3 options to neutralize bin Laden: compromise him somewhere in the world, kidnap him, we call it duct taping, or whatever else the president assigns that we can do legally under his authorities. But the political fortitude wasn't there, and the example that I mention is, what if somebody could have shot Hitler in 1939?
Right.
Or what if a guy like me would have shot bin Laden, or be like Billy, shoot bin Laden, or grab bin Laden and bring
Right.
him back, like you said, for interrogation? You know, you're talking the Cole would have happened. Our embassies in Africa would have been bombed, and 9/11 probably would have happened either. So that's the sad thing. That's the sad reality for us in the service, is that we are so vulnerable to the whims, the political whims. And when you have the lack of backbone and lack of fortitude to carry out these kind of things, the enemy knows that. The enemy knows that.
I think the enemy is seeing that now. And I think you brought up such an important point, because I think for a lot of people, you're absolutely right. You're on the ground. You understand being on the ground, just like any soldier or intelligence officer knows what the assessment is. Not the guys in Washington in the suits sitting comfortably behind their desks. And the thing is that they all thought that they were comfortably behind their desks until Osama bin Laden planned September 11th and flew those planes into the World Trade Center, into the Pentagon, and the other plane that crashed on site because of heroes on that plane that didn't allow it to go into the into the State Department or the White House. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. Are we always on the defensive instead of on the offensive? Like, we can see what people are doing. Why don't we get on the offensive? Why is the CIA, the DNI, or the administrations that, it's not all, but the good majority of them, so afraid of being on the offensive? What's the problem there?
You know, like I said, politics is a very, very tough profession, and I could never be a politician, because it's a matter of cutting deals with people forever and ever. It amazes me that we are ashamed to be the cowboy with a white hat. It pains me that we are embarrassed because we are the most powerful nation in the world. And it pains me that we are embarrassed that we are the number one fighting in the world. And all our allies are behind us and next to us, but not one of them can take point the way that we have taken point since World War I. So it is, to me, it's amazing when I love history, and it puzzles me when we take affirmative action against a known threat, we see the positive results. World War I, World War II, you name it. Mm-hmm. The Contras in Nicaragua, another success story, because we got involved. And yet we make the mistakes that, if you go back and see over and over again, is failures to derail. You know, one of the mottos of the counterterrorism center is to disrupt. There's a lot of ways of disrupting these kind of people.
But we didn't do that in a lot of aspects. But you did. I mean, you did with, let's talk about the Iran Contra. Let's talk about the Sandinistas and what you did in Nicaragua and and I love the part that you said to in your interview with 60 Minutes, where you were talking about, like, look, there was a lot of bad press coming out, but they weren't like that. The majority of the guys that you trained, that you worked with, and you trained them, by the way, by yourself for a good period of time, right? I mean, these were good men and women that were fighting against an oppressive communist regime that was coming right into our hemisphere, just like what happened in Cuba.
Well, it's funny because I had a wonderful career, and I can't, but that has to be the most rewarding period of my life. Also because we were successful. We did some great successful operations, like blowing up Puerto Cabezas, and which I was a part of. And of course, the fact that we were able to force the Sandinistas into an election that they lost. But imagine a Cuban kid who saw the revolution firsthand, who saw what happened to his parents and to his first country, but couldn't do a damn thing about it. And all of a sudden, this little Cuban from Miami, I am living in the Contra camps, and my sponsor is CIA. Every single night, I would grab a cup of coffee and I would sit with a different group of Contras. And I would ask them, I said, why are you here? Do you think any one of them says, well, when I read Lenin and Marx, I didn't agree. They didn't even know who Castro was, some of them.
Right.
It was all They burnt my church down. They beat up my priest. They raped my daughter. They forcibly conscripted my 15-year-old son, and so on and so on and so on. That is so rewarding at that level that, I slept in a jungle hammock for the better part of 3 years. Monday through Fridays, I was in the jungles and the camps with the Contras. I ate with them. I got sick with them. I got shot at with them. I never, ever said, oh, my God, what am I doing here? No, it was the most rewarding job. In our business, gratification usually comes down the road after a long period. Right. And this one, the fact that we were able to bring it to culminate was a big feather. And the Puerto Cabezas job that we did with my divers, it was so beautiful.
Yeah, explain that too, because I want our listeners to know. I mean, this is such an incredible operation that you were able to make this happen, that you trained people to literally be like the SEALs to make this happen. It was, regular guys, right?
Well, they were divers themselves. They were lobster divers.
Yeah, but a little different than a soldier, though, right?
Right, exactly. But now they had been Contras. They had been fighting. They were Mosquito Indians, which are the guys from the East Coast. And I had met them during some of the combat training that I was giving them for the first 14 months of the time I was there. I was the only guy allowed in the camp, so everything had to come through me. And I picked these guys when my headquarters came in and said, we need to do something more than raids and ambushes. We need a good left hook, kind of something to get their attention, show them to be vulnerable. So I came up with this harebrained idea. I says, well, I got these guys that know how to dive. I'm a military scuba guy. I'll train them up. We'll blow up Puerto Cabezas. Puerto Cabezas, the importance of Puerto Cabezas is that was the belly button for supply and resupply from Cuba. That's where the oil and the weapons and the ammunition, everything the Russians were funneling through Cuba was coming through Puerto Cabezas, and some of it going to El Salvador to incite further revolutions there. So I spoke to my boss. He liked the idea. He sent it up to headquarters. And there's a great photograph in the book with me with my divers and this 80-pound of C4 kind of bomb. And the Reader's Digest version of it is, I trained them for about a month first, after they passed the physical test and all that other stuff. And compass swims, being able to get the exact point by swimming underwater with a compass, the covert aspect, and of course, propping this thing up properly and arming it properly. So we came out of Puerto Lempira in a small panga boat to meet a PT boat that was just on the other side of the lagoon. And the mission did not start really well because right when we hit the edge, caught a surge, and the engine, the little engine of the boat fell off the transom. And I reached over. I was a little beefier back then. I reached over and I one-handed the thing into the boat, but then I fell over and there was a piece of metal in the boat, and I still have the scar. I don't know if you could see it.
I can't. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you live with it forever.
I love it. It's a badge of honor. I taped it up, and that was the only thing that went wrong in the mission. We got on the PT boat. It was timed perfectly. It was a moonless night. We got within 3 miles at the most of Puerto Cabezas. Jumped in the water with my guys. They headed us the bomb. Send my guys down to put this thing in. They came back. We went back, and by the time we were in back out of Nicaraguan waters, kaboom! We did it at night because we didn't want to hurt anybody. We wanted to have no collateral damage. And I will tell you, it is tattooed in my brain. 2 or 3 days later, when they showed me for the first time ever for me, satellite overhead of the bridge, I was doing the happy dance because it was so obvious and so rewarding that I said, there's one less tentacle in that octopus that I got to worry about.
That's right. That is how you described it. You described it as an octopus with lots of tentacles, and I still see it today. I want to ask you this. I want to get your opinion on this because my focus in Central America, even in Mexico, I look at what's happening. I see Russians moving around there. I see the Chinese Communist Party moving around, setting up shop. I see Iran inside Mexico, inside Central America. I mean, our enemies are like right around our doorstep, right? And what's going on? And we're
That's
opening the border. We're letting people just come on in. I just got a message from an ICE supervisor that said, "Hey, guess what? We're not even IDing people anymore. We're just letting them in." So I just want you to know that we're not even caring anymore.
Yeah. Well, that is a big pet peeve of mine. You figure in Venezuela, which is a country that was a democracy, that had some of the best oil in this hemisphere,
right?
And the price of toilet paper is more than their currency is worth. You know what you can do with that money, right?
Right.
And we allow it. The Russians are theirs, and the Iranians are there in force. They own banks, they clean money, they paper individuals, they smuggle them into the United States. We took our eyes off of Latin America, which is our backyard, by the way. And in the same way that the Russians are concerned about the Ukraine, we should be a little bit more concerned about our backyard. Because it is our backyard, and we represent democracy, not oppression and not takeovers. But there was a couple of things going on too. Terrorism was like a flashbang grenade that gets your attention.
Right.
We were not prepared really or trained for the counterterrorism mission. I mean, as a matter of fact, my agency, with the exception of guys like your husband and myself who grew up in Ground Branch, SID Ground Branch, the agency was primarily gun phobic. But terrorism all of a sudden forced us to start focusing on something. And I've heard people say, well, we took our eye off the ball when it came to Russia and China. And I said, well, I'm not saying that we could not, everybody with 20/20 hindsight could have a good idea. And maybe there is a better balance. But here's my analogy. Terrorism is like getting shot. Communism is like contracting cancer. One, you better stop the bleeding now or you're done. So when you have a mission to interrupt something that you know is going on, you can't be waiting days or weeks or whatever. Where with Russia or with communism writ large, it's a process and a progress that we should continue to see how we can fight back and everything else. But it's a longer track. Now, imagine, this, governments have finite resources, both financial and talent-wise. So if you have somebody trying to blow your White House up, where's your immediate focus is going to be?
It's going to be at the White House. Who's trying to blow it up?
Yeah, it's triage and for our resources. And communism was taking a second seat, but it was never off our operational directive. Never.
And I agree with you on that, but I feel as though we have kind of dropped the ball in a couple of areas, right? And it's something that you said was the second reason why you decided to retire, a poignant moment in your life, right? We took the ball off being on the offensive, right? Instead of being on the defensive. We're like, for example, right now, what's anyone going to say if a sleeper cell entered through the southern border with, they're going to say, well, we had no idea a sleeper cell could enter through the southern border. I'm going to say, no, you're a liar, because I can show you all the reports and I can show you me without any knowledge of classified information. I have put together enough open sourcing to show that the government was well aware that this could happen. So we kind of take our eye off the ball, and then we're like, oh, we got to get a lawyer or a JAG officer to figure out if we're allowed to target this house because maybe there might be some civilians, and we don't let somebody go in and just take the guy out. We don't need to use a big drone, right? We could just send in somebody like you. We could send in somebody who's a fighter like my husband, a group Delta Force, Navy SEALs like they did with bin Laden. Why didn't we do that anymore? Why are we just droning in the sky? Do they think that's better? Is it like?
Well, and I mentioned this to David. I don't recall if it made it into the actual interview because I'm on overload as it is. But one of the things that I mentioned was that, I mean, we could have done so much more, and we weren't allowed to. We were not allowed to, and I think it's the politics. The second episode that I was referring to was at the end of my career. I was chief of operations at the Counterterrorist Center when 9/11 happened. I had just taken over like 4 or 5 months before. I was overseas in a radical Muslim country where I was a chief of station. And 9/11 happened, and everybody's hair is on fire. But about 4 or 5 months into this thing, I was sitting down with Kofor and Ben Bonk, Topher was the chief of CTC, and Van was his deputy. And I told him, I said, look, we're missing the ball here. We're fighting these guys in Afghanistan, but they are all over the world, and those are the ones that are important. One thing that I learned in my Latin American counterterrorism tour, which I can't mention the country, but it's you could read it, is that you don't go after the shooters. They're a dime a dozen, and they're dumber than crap. You don't go after the heads of an organization because A, sometimes they're political. B, they're very hard to get. And 3, all these organizations are hydras. Somebody else will pop up, if not 2. I learned that what you do is you attack the soft underbelly of terrorism, and that's their support mechanisms. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're facilitators, the guys who move the money, the couriers. So my plan was not a kill them all and let God sort them out. On the contrary, I'm not that kind of person. Some people think I am. Am I capable?
I was going to say, I think I read somewhere like somebody said, well, you say that, but some people will think like, oh man, where'd this guy come from? And it's like, well, that's what we do in war, right?
Exactly. And that's the irony of it. Well, this particular, the plan was simple. Give me 30 names of bad guys worldwide. Some narco-terrorists, terrorists, whatever you want. And we put them on the books. We send our guys and gals out to do surveillance on them, just like Billy did in Khartoum against bin Laden. We establish the patterns of life. We know what cars they drive, what boyfriends they have, whatever the heck it is. And then we devise 3 operational plans for that individual. 1, compromise them through planning stuff in their car and calling the cops, something that's simple. Rendition operation. And if legalized by the president's signature, take direct action. Well, that wasn't like let the bodies hit the floor. On the contrary, the idea was to have these names on the wall. And then when you had chatter, like what we had before 9/11, imagine what would have happened if I would have had that team in August that I could have said, take 3 of these guys down. All of a sudden, 3 major figures in 3 different parts of the world get neutralized one way or the other. The first thing that they're going to do is hit the brakes. We've been penetrated.
That's right.
We would have at least bought us some time. That's what that program was all about. It was strictly a surveillance and an intel collection effort in planning towards the possibility that we may need to disrupt that organization before they really hurt us again like they did at 9/11. And
but they didn't want to do it.
Well, I actually briefed the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney. It's in the book. I briefed him on this program, and I briefed him on one particular guy, and he was elated. This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Congratulations, thank you. Tell your team good. He was elated. Condoleezza Rice was there. Still, we came up with the plans. First of all, we were successful in everything they allowed us to do. In the intel side,
right?
But when it came out to actually activate, it's in the book, the story where I'm on the 7th floor briefing our DDO and our DCI, and I'm there with a very, very senior agency division chief, and I gave him my plan, and the DDO says, "Well, Mr. Director, as you could see, there's no doubt in our minds that Prado and his team can not only do this, but get away from it, get away with it." And I went, yes, inside. Like, yeah, this is going to be a go. And then he said, but we need to weigh the political ramifications of this action. The division chief, an SIS-5, got up, closed his notebook. The next day he retired. That was... and I'm not saying that we deserved the green light, but we deserved to be represented to the higher management because it was the Vice President of the United States that told us to go ahead and put these things together, flesh them out, and then come back and get permission. Leadership decided not to ever take it back up, probably in fear of him saying, hell yeah, I want it done. And then they would have to do it.
That's an
So it's
incredible
politics.
story because it is politics and it's the bureaucracy. And sometimes it breaks my heart for the guys because like I know, and I think so many of your friends know, we've lost people we loved. People have given everything for their country. They put their life on the line, and it's the boots on the ground. It's those people that actually, like you and my husband and other people who have worked operations overseas, that tangibly can bring back to the bureaucracy, right? To those that never go out in the field, like the facts, right? These are the facts. This is what we've got. And this is what we can do to make a difference. Do you think right now, this is one of my fears right here. And you're the perfect person to answer this. When you see communist China, President Xi, you see Vladimir Putin's operations, you see Iran, and Iran likes to use proxies. So do the Chinese. So does Russia. We have the Western Hemisphere just a complete mess right now. I believe, and even in our country, they're seeing weakness. Our enemies are seeing weakness. Couldn't one of these nations just try to use proxies to target us or target our assets overseas or target us here and, to make us weaker? But it really be them? It could really be Russia, could really be China, it could really be Iran, but then maneuvering these like terror groups or these cartel organizations to target us? That's what I'm worried about.
Are you sure you were not a CIA undercover guy?
I'm sure. I spent a lot of time traveling, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking outside the box. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to look at where the weaknesses are and how I can do it. I'm not going to be, I'm going to be smart about it. So we have to be smarter than them, right?
Well, back to the topic of what we were talking about of using surrogates as they do. There's several vignettes in the book of where we actually were able to find out. And one was against North Koreans. I took down a North Korean agent who was recruiting Latin Americans and sending them into the United States in order to be a sleeper cell, but also provide access to embargoed technology, which they're always very thirsty for. I compromised this guy personally. I said about as close as I am to my screen from the guy when I threatened him. And, he didn't take my pitch, but we destroyed him. We took him down. We were able to, he got PNG'd and he ended up in some gulag. But it was an eye-opening thing for me. Oh, yeah, I drank champagne that night when I found out. It was amazing to me that here you have North Koreans infiltrating people into the United States. So incredible. I did 4 years of my career in what was fighting communism against North Korea. I did it out of Seoul, and I did it as I was the head of the Korea operations. That's where I got my senior grade, my flag rank was when I took over that in '98. And
that's got to be one tough assignment. That has to be like an extraordinarily tough assignment because North Korea is so closed off from the rest of the world. It's like, geez, And when you're not Korean, when you're like, exactly. I'm focused.
And, the movies like James Bond that he lands in Korea for a diamond deal. That's all as BS. But it's here's the lesson that, and I actually spoke to this to some very senior military guys when the Korea thing was really heightened. I said, the military's got a handle on what's going on the peninsula. Every weakness, every strength. Every frequency, all that stuff. I know, and you have your plans. However, what people are not focusing on is there are over 50 North Korean embassies in the world. Those North Korean embassies are 90% intel officers and one security officer that keeps an eye on them. And what they're there to do is first make money for the regime. How do you make money if you're an embassy?
Right.
Drugs. Smuggling, human trafficking, super notes, all that crap. Second is gaining, and I mentioned this, gaining technology that they could ship back. But the third is targeting their enemies. I hate to tell you, North Korea only has two enemies, South Korea and us. So and I told the generals, I said, you got to understand that if we go to war against North Korea, we will be attacked in 50 different missions of ours in worldwide. So we better start doing what I was trying to do with these guys and make book and see who those bad Koreans are. So if we're about to pull the balloon, I can at least try to interdict these guys before they start blowing my own people up.
That's such an important point. If you had, Rick, I want to keep you on for like, I'm flying. You're in Florida, right? Because I am going to fly to Florida and I'm going to just sit down and talk to you. I'm going to take you out to lunch. But if and I'm going to bring you back on the show over and over because everybody should have this. I mean, for me, this is really fascinating because I believe that protecting our nation is a multifaceted process. We have to understand that there are people like, for everyone out there listening, like Rick, that are behind the scenes that nobody ever knows about. They do everything they can. They put their life on the line to save our nation from like threats that we don't even conceive because it doesn't happen because of them, because you stop it. But I'm wondering right now, like the way things are going, the way we're heading, if there's a geopolitical shift on our planet right now. I mean, I'm seeing China rise up. We're seeing what's happening with Russia. It's like they're trying to seize power from us, like saying, you know what, US? No more. You guys don't need to be number one anymore. We're going to be number one. So this is a big fight. I don't think it's just going to end with Ukraine.
No, and the sad thing about this, and I mentioned before that for me, socialism is the mask that communism hides behind. And they sell you the utopic view of everybody's going to be equal. Well, everybody is equal, equally oppressed, equally poor, equally hungry. And then the nomenclature of the government are the ones that have all the benefits because they're dictators like anybody else. Mm-hmm. We are the laughing stock. I mean, if I was the KGB, I would be rolling on the floor going like, thank you. You guys are making this so easy for us because we're undermining our own society. We're dividing our own society. Instead of uniting our societies, political parties should not put left, right when it comes to the people. And right. a lot of Americans don't understand this. And the main reason most Americans don't understand this is because they don't know how good we have it. Ask your parents how good we have it, okay? Because
you're right.
Most Americans, when they travel, they go, oh, I went to Mexico, and it was wonderful. No, you went to Cancun on a cruise. Go down to some of those towns and tell me how good Mexico is.
Right. Or go to Chiapas. Go to Chiapas, yeah. Or go down to, just into the little enclaves on the border where people live in little huts and, yep. Plywood houses. They have nothing.
And part of the problem, and unfortunately, I think it happened under Reagan, we did away with mandatory service. Notice I didn't say military duty. I said service. Mm. I honestly believe that the Israeli model of having everybody have to serve in some capacity, serving the country for 2 years, is the way to have skin in the game. And the example that I use is only 2% of the U.S. population serves in the military at any given time. All right, let's add another 8% of that are law enforcement, first responders, and teachers.
Right.
Okay. So you're talking that 90% of the United States population doesn't have real, skin in the game. Because you know what? When I go vote, if you put in front of me the fact that, hey, well, yeah, we need to cut back on military because it's too expensive, and both my boys are in the military, guess what my vote's going to be? No, you're not. They need more money because they need the bulletproof vests and everything else. So
that's right.
We as Americans need to find, be told, be shown how good we are instead of dividing us, highlight our strengths. And if we do that, if we can unite the people here, we're invincible. But we are actually cutting our own throat.
I actually do believe that too. And that's what really frightens me. I know, if there could be one bit of advice that you could give this administration based on your experiences and your history, Rick, what would that be?
It would be strengthening us rather than weakening us. And it's not just militarily, it's not just funding the CIA or our sister agencies. It's things like, let's be field independent. Let's take care of our people and do what's best for our people, not what's politically, socially, acceptable. We're afraid for people. No, you got to take care of number one so you could take care of number two, three, and four. And
That's right.
a lot of the policies that I've seen in and out for the last couple of decades is that we tend to politicize things and thus make a chasm between our people. And that is so destructive because, there's no better place than the United States. If you're a minority in some other countries, Asia for one, you are literally looked down upon. So
That's true.
Are we perfect? Hell no. Has this country made mistake? We're humans. Tell me one country that was not involved in slavery and everything else. I mean, if you want to start destroying monuments, here's one: the pyramids. The pyramids were built on slave labor of captured enemies. Okay, so let's go down and knock the pyramids down. So there's been a lot of, that's human beings. We could be.
Yeah, but I feel
animal.
that a lot of that tearing down of the monuments and all of this division is the way that the communists operate too. I mean, look, that's part of how they do things. My aunt would say to me, Sara, this reminds me of Cuba. Early on, where they start tearing down the monuments, start tearing down the education system, start teaching the children that their parents are antiquated, that they don't understand the fatherland or the homeland, and you have to turn your parents in if they're not behaving, and it starts with the kids. And I see that here in America, and that's what frightens me. That's what I talk about on the show all the time, is like, we have to stop, like you said, being divided. And we have to see who's really playing us.
Well, the irony of all this is that you said this is what the Russians, that's what the communists do, but we're doing it to ourselves. That's why I say they're laughing, because they're saving money. Hey, we don't need to go disrupt and undermine their society. They're doing that very well on their own. Really ironic.
I don't know if they planted, and you know what, Rick? I don't know if that was a seed planted long ago that kind of just grew, like you said, like a cancer. And maybe they didn't expect it to, but it sure did blossom in our university systems and in our school systems. And it's like they put the seed there. They didn't know what was going to happen. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, hey, we got a bunch of communists right there in the school set. We didn't have to recruit them. They're just there. They're doing the work without the recruitment.
That's right. That's right. One of the handicaps of a democracy, and don't get me wrong, I am all about democracy, is the fact that we do our planning in 4-year increments. Mm-hmm. So our long-term plan is get me to the next election and let me win that one and do another 4 years and then get my guy in or my gal in and so on and so on. The Russians and the Chinese don't have that. They have 50-year plans because that is a map that will never change. You may tweak it with the realities, but your 50-year plan holds no matter who is in power. And Putin is a perfect example of that. Their plan from Lenin to Khrushchev was dominate that whole area, and he is trying to do exactly the same thing.
Do you think he'll be successful at it? Do you think he'll be successful, or do you think the Ukrainians will hold him off in a long insurgency?
I'm praying that Ukrainians hold them off, but the breakaway provinces, we're going to lose those.
I agree with you on that, man.
That's fight. Ukrainians fighting Ukrainians, backed by Russians, and it would give them further enticement. What I'm praying for is that's as far as the Russians are able to conquer, because I think they've been surprised about the resistance that they've met and how brave these Ukrainians are. So I pray every day. I go like, please, just I'm a realist. I'm a pragmatist. Those breakaway provinces were already half on the other side anyway. If we could stop them there, and then buttress the rest of the government with, worldwide support, not just U.S., worldwide support, right. Then we may at least keep it there, and that will be the degree of their creeping normalcy.
I'll pray for that too, Rick. I can't thank you so much. This was the most amazing. I think this is one of the best interviews I've ever done with anyone. Wow. I'm so fascinated by your knowledge and what you know. And I feel like I've learned so much from you, Rick. I hope you come back on the show. And I really want to meet you in person now. I'm telling you, I'm heading to Florida whenever you have a chance to set it up.
You need to talk to Mary Beth, because we're doing a book signing on 19 March at the Spy Museum. They're carrying my book, And as a matter of fact, I'm having dinner with her and Joe Fluid the night before. So we'd love to meet you.
I would love to meet you too. Okay, I'm going to definitely give her a call after this. And thank you. I don't even know how to thank you. I'm going to be pushing your book online. I'm going to be pushing your book on all my social media. So you and we are not going to stop talking because there's a lot I'd like to talk to you about.
Well,
some of it not on the record.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate your support because, this was a labor of love. And my only goal with this book is to really portray my agency in a more realistic light and do honor to our patriots and our fallen. We have, like I said, we have 137 stars on the wall. So
some of them were my friends.
Some of them were my friends. Some of them I sent there. And those people deserve the respect of the average American, which Hollywood will never, ever portray.